Hi, and welcome to The Curling Show, the podcast that brings you interviews with the sport's top athletes and the people who shape the game. I'm Dean Gemmel, and this is the second edition brought to you by J.L. Powell, supplier of apparel and equipment for the sporting life. If you haven't visited jlpowellusa.com, you really should, because this is a company that offers so much more than the typical all-too-generic men's clothing you'll find elsewhere. Not that it's the kind of stuff that tries too hard to get attention. It's just incredibly well made with stories behind it. Anything you get from J.L. Powell is going to endure, probably for generations. So go to jlpowellusa.com. That's jlpowellusa.com. Plenty of Canadians already have. And discover a brand that's authentic and real in every way. Now, on to the interview. One of the founders of CurlingZone.com, executive director of the Ontario Curling Tour, and an innovator in the world of curling statistics, Gerry Geurts. Welcome to the Curling Show.
Thanks, Dean. It's great to finally get together with you.
Well, we know each other from seeing each other at events and whatnot, but you've never been on the show, and it's about time you were. A lot of people in curling know about your involvement in CurlingZone.com and surely appreciate your efforts with that site, know that you've worked with the forces behind the Capital One Grand Slam series, and know about the Black Book of Curling. But let's start by talking about the Ontario Curling Tour, a cash spiel circuit you've helped develop. At a time when some are trying to grow the highest levels of the game, as others fear that the sport is losing touch with the grassroots recreational curler, where does a tour like the OCT fit?
The Ontario Curling Tour, it has a niche to allow teams to play more often, teams who don't have the resources to travel much, and time resources at the same time, where family and all that stuff gets in the way. The Ontario Curling Tour is creating a lot more smaller events where teams can get out and play and learn to win and just get that experience before they can use this as a stepping stone to move up into some of the bigger events, the World Curling Tour, and even some of the bigger Ontario Curling Tour events have some very solid fields in them.
I mean, that's a good point because, I mean, some of the Ontario Curling Tour events are also World Curling Tour events. Is that right?
Yeah, any event in Ontario that is on the World Curling Tour, we count points towards the Ontario Curling Tour as well.
Now, when you say smaller events, what exactly do you mean by a smaller event?
Like, we're looking to find events that are anywhere in the range from $200, $300, $400 entry fee, where teams are out playing in an event-style format where the top team, might not win a whole lot of money, but, they'll triple their entry fee possibly. But the teams who we want to keep around and playing more often and getting out and learning, they're not going to break the bank. They might get half their entry fee back by making a D-event final or something like that.
How many teams like that are there in Ontario? Tons and tons more to be found?
I think there's quite a few teams. We see a good number of teams that play and enter these events, but don't enter playdowns. They're your your top club teams. They don't really have an interest in going for the Brier or any of that stuff, but they like to go out for a weekend of fun. A team like that with a little bit of success, and they see themselves as being able to compete, and that can take a team a long way. And those teams are the teams that will enter playdowns when they feel confident enough to be competitive.
Give me an example of a specific team or a kind of team that you think's really benefited from the Ontario Curling Tour.
Well, a few years ago, a group of guys out of North Halton, led by Steve Cartwright, they were solid club curlers in their club, but they just wanted more, and they wanted to do something a little bit more, and they entered into some Ontario Curling Tour events, and like Steve said, they got their butts handed to them a few times. But by the end of the first season, they started to see some improvement, and they stuck it out for another year. And that second year, they had some reasonable success early on, reaching a tiebreaker in Barrie, and eventually qualifying later that season. And then that season, they went on to win the Colts Championship, which in Ontario is sort of the B-level provincial championship. So it takes time to improve and get better, and finding a place where you can do that without spending huge money and having to travel long distances, and playing teams that are at your level or just a little bit better really makes a big difference.
Yeah, and Colts, for people outside of Ontario, is essentially, I think, for players who haven't won a zone championship in Ontario?
Players who have not been to a provincial,
okay,
to the men's provincials, or for the women's side, they have the trophy. It's the same thing.
And they've had, I mean, players like Scott Bailey have won the Colts, Todd Branwood, a few others.
Russ Howard won it way back when.
Russ Howard, yeah, not a bad player. So is your sense that when these guys, teams like that, and they improved, are you seeing some of those teams then enter playdowns? We hear a lot of concern about playdown entries being down. Is that the case in Ontario?
In Ontario, we've managed to keep the playdown entries fairly consistent. The men's side has been solid. It was down a bit this year. Not sure why, but the previous years it was maintaining. The women's side has been up quite substantially, and the second-tier provincials are actually up as well, Colt and the women's trophy.
One lesson I think in Ontario as well might be that a lot of players in Ontario really view that provincial championship there as their sort of briar, right? To get to that is considered quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's definitely part of it. It's also a great party too, and I think that's one of the big reasons why teams love to get there as well.
Based on your involvement with the Ontario Curling Tour, what ideas can you share that you think would be helpful to similar tours in other parts of Canada or even other places around the world?
I think the biggest thing we need to consider is creating strength and depth across the tour. We don't need to target the elite teams as much because they're always going to have somewhere to play. But you need teams to keep these events strong and full year after year. The way I think about it for an event is you need the top third of the field, they're there to win the event. The middle third of the field, they're there to qualify, and that's probably their goal. And if they put together a good run, they can get deeper into the playoffs. And the bottom third of the field is there for experience and for a good time. And that bottom third of the field is always the toughest to fill. And finding teams that, they don't have a very good shot at winning or even qualifying, but they need to you need to build out those spots every year.
We've talked a lot here about the Ontario Curling Tour, developmental tour as you call it. One of the things we hear some complain about is that the major ASHAM World Curling Tour events and the Capital One Grand Slam Series are essentially events built for a very select group of teams. Is that fair?
I don't think that's fair anymore. At one point, the Grand Slams, when they originated, were signed contracts for teams to play. But now there's ways to get in. You got to win your way into the Grand Slams, and you got to win to stay in them as well. There's been quite the turnover in the Grand Slams from new teams, like Reed Carruthers' team last season made their Slam debut and stuck around for the season. They'll have a new skip this year with Daley Peters, so we'll see how the points add up to whether they have their spot again this year or not. But Pat Simmons was not an original Slam team, and now you'd consider him part of that Grand Slam group. He had a couple great seasons on the World Curling Tour and earned his way in. Kerry Burtnick is another example of a team who, while he was an original team, he retired, and his points disappeared. But he won 6 out of his first 7 events, I believe. The year he came back, earned enough points to get back into the Grand Slams again. It's now about winning your way in, and there's a lot of people out there that see this as a tough road to get in there, but these are great teams that get into the Grand Slams, and they're there for a reason.
Well, I think that is the point. It is a tough road to get in. There's nothing wrong with that.
It is very similar to the Briar in that you don't just get in for no reason. You got to win a bunch of games before you get there. And generally, to qualify for the Grand Slams, you need to have one solid season, and then you need to start off the next year with a good run in the first couple months. And you can see yourself being within shooting distance of qualifying for the Grand Slams for the season.
Those are good points, and I agree. I think those events come under some undue criticism, but there are some things I think they could do. I think one thing that this tour or the Grand Slam series should look at is a Saturday, Sunday single knockout local qualifier.
Yeah, I like that idea too, and it's been tossed around as a possibility. Generally, a local team or the provincial champion from the province where the thing is being hosted, where each event is being hosted, does get an entry. But I think something like that might stir up a little extra interest in the event.
Well, yeah, that's part of it. I think that's a big thing with it. I mean, you'd have some play going on the weekend before the event that would get some interest in the event that follows.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with that, and I think that's something you may see in the future. But at this point, it's run on a pretty lean group of people organizing the event, and part of that is doing the things that need to get done at the same time.
Going back to the developmental level of the game for a moment, what's your take on the new Dominion Curling Club Championship, a club-based playdown recently announced by the CCA and the Dominion of Canada General Insurance Company?
I think it's great for the developmental side of the game. It's exactly what the sport needs, especially out west, where you have one shot at playdowns, and then there really isn't a whole lot of secondary events for teams to play in, and I think it'll probably be very well received out there. Ontario has a system like this already, so there'll probably have to be some cooperation between the OCA and Dominion onto how they handle the playdown process here. But anything that gets more people out playing and experiencing the competitive side of the game, the better.
When you say Ontario has a process like that, do you mean that in Ontario players still have to belong to the same club?
I'm talking more about the Holiday Inn Challenge, where
Okay.
there's a playdown for club curlers and teams that play together in leagues and stuff like that. The biggest thing with something like this is you get the curlers out playing competitively. They get the taste of competition, and this is especially big for junior curlers who come out of juniors without somewhere to play. Especially the teams who are your secondary level curlers, the guys who they love to compete, but they maybe reached the provincials and finished in the bottom half of the field. These players aren't going to be picked up by your men's teams, and so they need somewhere to play some more and learn, and rather than just going to their club and playing the Monday night league and something like that, you don't get that same energy that you did when you played in juniors.
Hey, interesting point about juniors there. I don't know. I doubt they're going to be eligible to play in this, but I've often wondered.
It goes 16 years old.
16 years old to play in that.
15 years old.
I've often wondered why Canada's been reluctant to change the rules to allow juniors to play in regular men's and women's playdowns.
I think the biggest issue behind that was probably sponsorship.
Yeah, but I mean, Tim Hortons is legal whether you're 9 or 19.
Yeah, but alcohol companies sponsoring events sometimes causes an issue. That's probably the biggest reason behind the men's playdowns being that way. When Labatt sponsored it, it was probably part of the case.
Right.
It could change now, but then again, you lose a potential sponsor if the rules are that way, or potential sponsor group.
Well, I guess the thing that's interesting is Canada is the only country that doesn't allow juniors to play down.
In Ontario, if you're in your last year of juniors, you can enter into zones. But again, you're 19 by that point, and I believe that's probably the biggest reason why.
Right.
Alexander Keith, for example, is a sponsor of the Briar. So how would Alexander Keith feel if an underage player made it to the Briar with their product being only available for people above 19? So that's probably the biggest reason why. Well,
it sounds like outdated Victorian-era thinking to me, Gerry.
Well, it's the way it is.
I understand.
Branson.
But you see, young tennis players used to play in the Virginia Slims. I think we're all growing up enough to get past it. But I understand.
But in this age of political correctness, that makes it worse than it ever used to be.
Well, it's political correctness or moral rectitude. I think it's probably the latter more than anything. But that's a debate for another time and another show that I need to start. Anyways, Gerry, enough about the tour and development and all those sort of things involved with the game. What about CurlingZone? We've recently seen some of the other curling websites in the Hack and Curling City, for instance, shut down. Most of us know about the forums on CurlingZone, but I think some people may not realize the site has a lot more going for it than just the forums. What can curlers expect going forward?
Well, with our work that we do with the World Curling Tour and the Ontario Curling Tour and also other tours around the world, we've been building a lot of tools that allow teams and events to help manage themselves. There's the new Teams Manager we have, teams.curlingzone.com, as well as our events.curlingzone.com, where any event that's part of the Ontario Curling Tour or the World Curling Tour can go in, log in, and manage their information, set up teams and all that stuff to help make their life easier. CurlingZone's more than just the website. We do a lot of stats and information services for events. We were at the Scottish National Championships this past February, and we'll be going back again this year to help them manage their information. As well, the United States Curling Association will be working with them for their events. So really, the business behind CurlingZone is more than the website.
I think you and Dallas deserve a lot of credit for taking curling stats out of the Stone Age. We've gone a long way from the days of strictly shooting percentages.
Yeah, definitely. We're both big baseball fans, and we saw a spot where we were missing something with this sport, and a lot of the statistics that we generate and build are team-based stuff. So, how well is the team working together? What are your team's strengths and weaknesses, and so on? And there's so much information that we've pulled out of games and line scores and stuff that I think we are yet to reach what we can really figure out.
Hey, finally, Gerry, we all know how difficult it can be to find dollars to back just about any curling venture. I know it well, of course, but I think people who run events and everybody else knows too. I think too many companies still believe it's an old man's game, and yet when a 41-year-old like me goes to an OCT event, I feel more than a little old. How do you think we start to change the perceptions about who plays and who follows the sport?
I think one of the things I've been working on is trying to bring out the profiles of the players a bit more, both on the World Curling Tour and the Ontario Curling Tour, building out the profile section on the teams and getting more photos and general information like that out. I think the biggest thing is that potential sponsors need to see young faces and profiles of working people who are doctors, are lawyers, are engineers, and they'll see a vibrant community where it really is turning into a young man's sport, a young woman's sport as well. And you get a lot of young players out. The Ontario Curling Tour and even the World Curling Tour, you see a lot of young players out there, and especially with a lot of the fitness requirements nowadays to play 3 games in a day, it does make sense.
I sometimes think the Asham World Curling Tour or the Capital One Grand Slam should make sure they put out an average age of competitors before each event, because I think that might help in some way if you get people to pick up that story.
You know what? That's a great idea.
There you go. I'm good for one good idea a show, I think, Gerry. Let's finish with the run back, all right? I'll give you a topic. Give me your thoughts in 1 to 3 words.
All right, let's go.
08-09 Team Gushu lineup versus 07-08 Team Gushu lineup.
More experience.
Kevin Park at third for Jeff Stoughton.
Throwing a wrench into the residency rules.
And along with that, Don Walchuk at third for Kerry Burtnick. Ditto?
Ditto.
Yeah. What's your take on that?
I think the Walchuk move for Burtnick is going to be more about the Olympic trials, and it sounds like they're not going to play down. Whereas, from the sounds of things, Kevin Park is moving to Winnipeg, and Stoughton is going to go that whole route.
Yeah, I mean that's always the question, right? Is moving in quotes, or is it genuine? And I had this discussion with Chris Shilley, and I don't have any easy answers on this residency stuff because I like to see guys put together good teams, but I don't think you can have provincial representation without,
Yeah, well, Manitoba has some pretty strict residency rules, and they do require players to actually live in the region, and they've tightened the rules up for this year as well in response to these moves. But I believe Kevin has actually got as a business that's pretty, he can do it from just about anywhere. For him to actually move into Jeff's basement or whatever, it's probably, or find an apartment in Winnipeg, I think it's something that's very doable.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, actually, we're going to see a lot of people with different jobs now who can live just about anywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, maybe the technology world will solve some of these residency issues. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the solutions are in that. I know there'll probably be some guys in Manitoba get upset, but so it goes.
Yeah, the only issue you're really looking at is you're going to discourage some of the competitive teams from playing when teams start to do this. You have two great teams in Manitoba, likely, and you have two great teams in Ontario. And if these guys decide to say, "Hey, let's split up and move to provinces where we can both get to the Brier," then you're going to start to see some major problems with entries in the game, I think.
All right, let's get back to the run back. Mark Johnson playing for the men's U.S. title in the Olympic Games spot.
You know what? You got to get there any way you can.
Mixed doubles.
Great for the game.
Team Jennifer Jones in the Casino Rama TSN Skins game.
I think the sponsors will love it, and she might surprise some of the boys.
The qualifying process for the Canadian Olympic curling trials.
I think it's perfect.
Perfect. I haven't heard perfect from anybody but you, Gerry, but...
I really think it creates a long-term movement to get our best teams there, and it creates team dynamics, and you got to stick together as a team as well.
Good point. Hey, I usually let people let players name sponsors of their teams. I don't know if you have sponsors, but I'd like you to let me know about any projects you have underway.
I've been working on a lot of the little sections of the website to help make life easier for teams and events and all that stuff. Any
word on the Black Book of Curling?
We're still up in the air yet, but I'd like to do another version again this year.
Well, it's a great publication. I know it's a challenge to get it out and a challenge to try to find enough curling junkies to buy it, but I think it's been great for the game.
Yeah, it's never really made us any money, but it's definitely given a lot more exposure to the stuff that we do, the stats and the information, and I think that in itself has generated revenue for CurlingZone.
All right, Gerry, thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of the summer. I know they got the first event, I guess, is the OCT Championships coming up in Oakville, right?
Yep, that's the first one that I'll be at.
Good field at that?
Yeah, we've got Wayne Madaw headlining that event, and we've probably got a majority of the better teams in Ontario playing this weekend, so I'm looking forward to it.
Well, good luck to all of them, including the bottom third.
I'm part of that.
Hey, all right, Gerry. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the summer, and look forward to the start of curling season and more action on CurlingZone.com.
Thanks, Dean.
That's Gerry Geurts on The Curling Show, brought to you by J.L. Powell, supplier of apparel and equipment for the sporting life. Visit jlpowellusa.com. Finally, thanks to everyone who's joined The Curling Show group on Facebook. As much as possible, it's the place where I'll keep listeners informed about what's coming up on the podcast. As always, thanks for listening.
Salt flat screaming, Jim beaming, no two grains of sand are alike. Sow the seed, reap the speed, angel's wing on a Chinese kite, yeah!